Welcome back, guys, to the TRP. Today we're going to discuss why we've been a bit inconsistent. To the 5 regular viewers, you would have noticed we've haven't filmed anything for months, but today we are going to discuss a serious topic, something that's happened to my friend, and take you on the journey. So Nath, over to you.
Yeah, welcome back to the TRP, guys. So, yeah, we've obviously been very consistently inconsistent. But yeah, I mean, it's a difficult topic to... Where do we start? So obviously, we did that episode about me finishing uni, didn't we? And about the highs of that, and I was kind of excited about where my life was going to go.
Yeah.
Obviously, trained for a marathon, and...
Which you haven't shut up about.
I didn't shut up about. Yeah, good point.
But that's expired now. You can't.
Yeah,
keep
it's expired. I can't
up.
use. Yeah, I need a new achievement now. But yeah, so obviously ran the marathon in the April, and then what were we? I know the exact date. It was the 16th of June. My head had been in a bad place, hadn't it? And so that day, I woke up. About 4 a.m. I'm lying in my bed, and there's some really dark things going through my head. And I actually said to one of my friends that I'm pretty sure this is going to be my last day here, because it's really hard to explain, but there was almost... Like, it wasn't that I was hearing voices, but there was like this almost separate entity. It's like it felt like it was steering the ship. You? Yeah, like it felt like it was. Yeah. It was steering the ship. Like
so. Just for context for the viewers, so I wasn't aware of these thoughts that Nathan was having. On that day, me and him, we went for a walk. We went to the Forest of Dean. There was no like phone signal. So. Obviously, he's had this conversation with someone else, explaining his dark thoughts. I'm not aware. We've gone to the Forest of Dean. There's no signal. So whoever he told wasn't able to contact you. That's right, isn't it?
Well, she was trying to contact you, but obviously couldn't get through.
Which then caused her to panic. She contacted the police, said that she thinks you've gone missing. And... whilst this is going on, me and you are completely oblivious, and I'm actually oblivious to your state of mind. Like, I knew you like weren't in a great mood, but I didn't know you were having dark thoughts. Like, you were still talking relatively normal when we were going for the walk through the forest. But it was only when we were on the way back, and I had a load of missed calls. You had a load of missed calls. The police had obviously been to your place. I think they spoke to your brother, who sent them to my place. And then my mum had said, here's a telephone number from the officer that visited, give him a call, which I did. He asked me about your mental state. I said I wasn't really like aware, and then he come and visited you, didn't he?
Yeah, so when I got back, well, there was no one at my flat when I got back, but quickly after that, actually the 2 police officers showed up first. Then my brother came back with some of my other siblings, and yeah, I mean, I was extremely emotional, and the police, we had a long-winded conversation about how and why it got to that point, and they were obviously assessing whether or not I was a danger to myself or anyone else, and I think it was quite clear at that point that I was a danger to myself, and they basically said, you're going to need to go to this psychiatric unit and be assessed. So I went there with my brother, and, very quickly they said to me, if you don't come in voluntarily, then we're going to section you. And so I thought, in a practical sense, it makes more sense for me to come in voluntarily, because I know what happens when you're sectioned, and I know that it's going to be far more intrusive in your life than if you go in voluntarily. So I go in that night, not really wanting to be honest with you, because I hadn't quite grasped the severity of what was going on in my head. Like I said to my brother, I'll go for a day or two and I'll come out, because I've been there before and I know what it's like. But yeah, I think that night was a really humbling experience of how quickly, since, graduating from my master's and finishing a marathon and, having big goals in my head, how quickly life can flip like that. And yeah, so I, over the next, what was that? That was the 16th of June. And I then spent 5.5 weeks in that psychiatric unit.
So what was so you said that life can switch like that. I assume like you mean like your mindset and where your headspace is at.
Yeah.
What were the triggers that got you to that point? Because I knew you were having like, for example, I know you wasn't happy in your job, right? Because that was quite an isolating job. I knew you were having some relationship issues. But what were the triggers that shifted you into having those dark thoughts? Because I knew you were having a rough time, but like I said, I was unaware that you were having dark thoughts. Like when we went for a walk that day, but you must have had them the night before because you were telling someone else about it. So what was the triggers that shifted your mindset?
Yeah, I think there was a few triggers. You're right. I did have the breakdown of a relationship. It was an on and off relationship, and the breakdown of that relationship was my fault, without a shadow of a doubt. But needless to say, that didn't stop it having an immensely negative impact on me, even though it was self-inflicted. And yeah, the job was extremely isolating. At that point, I was working like evening shifts, and it was, a driving job. So I was by myself. The only person I was really seeing at that point was you in the morning when we went to the gym.
Yeah.
And then outside that, my life was very, very isolated. That didn't help. I'm someone who struggles a lot with being by myself too much. And I think, the lack of purpose I had at that point, because, obviously I'd finished my master's, which had been a big part of my life for the previous 5-6 years, university in general. And obviously, like, I straight away thought, I'm going to run a marathon. Do you know what I mean? And that kept me going for a few months, having something to focus on, a goal to focus on. But after that, and then the sort of breakdown of the relationship, and, there's other factors. I was having issues with, not my own personal addiction, but other people in my life struggling with addiction. And that was, I guess it was triggering in terms of the trauma of what I'd been through as, in my childhood and early adulthood.
So there's quite a few variables here compounding together then.
Yeah, and like we said, what those triggers did is they compounded to a point where they created a distorted reality in my head.
Yeah.
And I think, from speaking to you, that's the post the day I went into hospital, it became clear to me that what I was thinking at that point it wasn't reality. Like I said, it's a distorted reality. You don't have when you're in that dark place and those thoughts are ruminating, and you become sort of, the suicidal ideation is overriding your normal state of mind. You struggle to have a good grasp of reality. Like, I didn't have I was thinking to myself, what's the point in any of this? This is the 4th sort of failed relationship I've had. This is, I've got no purpose now because I'm not in uni. I'm not driving towards something. Life just felt very...
Or just like bleak.
Yeah.
So I know you've mentioned before about when you've been in those relationships, they've almost been just sort of suppressing like the other problems in your life? Is that how you felt? So like when the relationship ended, did you feel like everything else was piling up on you, like heightened?
Yeah, for sure, man. I think, I was only talking to one of my good mates this morning about how when I ended up in hospital in 2019, not so long after I came out of hospital is when I met the person who I've had like the sort of on-off relationship with.
Yeah.
And I think, we spent a lot of time together during COVID, and she definitely became a false sense of security for me, because it was like those issues, like that unhealed trauma and all the sort of negative aspects of my emotions, they weren't being dealt with. They're almost like locked away in a box in the back of my mind. And she, she's an amazing person, but she, was a great. I relied on her for my happiness, and I relied on her for stability. And actually, it's almost like, when she finally did leave my life, it's like,
everything falls apart.
Yeah, well, all the other things compound, and it's like
that's quite a dangerous place to be, though, isn't it? When you're relying on someone else for your happiness.
Definitely.
And I think it's a common thing. Like, we all do it, but the problem you've got is if that person disappears one day, regardless of how, then your world would crumble, wouldn't it? Because you've relied on them, and essentially they're probably just masking over problems that you haven't dealt with. I think like you said, it comes back to that point of you've built a false sense of security.
Definitely, mate, and that's exactly what the position I was in. And it's not like I don't look back at my situation and think, I don't want any sympathy off anybody, because many of my problems I created them, through not dealing with unhealed trauma predominantly, I think, because that's ultimately, I think, why I've not been able to have stable relationships, in a romantic.
That's not isolated to you, though, is it? That's a very common thing. There's people in relationships that shouldn't be there because they haven't dealt with their own personal traumas, right? So then when they get in a relationship, that relationship's just plugging the holes, isn't it, on a sinking ship? So you're not, you ultimately it's going to turn toxic, or it's going to break down.
Yeah,
because you haven't dealt with your own problems, and then when it does break down, and it's like a breakdown on steroids, isn't it? Because now everything else is heightened, it's a danger to rely on someone too much, I think. Even if they're your friends, even family, if you have a heavy reliance on someone, then you're allowing that person to dictate your mood. If they let you down, and then if you've got other things going on, like you were isolated in your job, you had trying to help people close to you with addiction, all of those things like building up, and then it manifests in your own depression.
Yeah, absolutely. And
could throw you off the rails. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and the one thing I'd say is that's exactly what happens. Is it compounds?
Yeah.
Like, take one of those things in isolation. I probably wouldn't have got to that point if it was only one thing. But I'm sure everyone goes through dark periods, and so many people have, intrusive thoughts. We actually all have intrusive thoughts. It's just not every person has intrusive thoughts to the nature of wanting to end their life. But we all have intrusive thoughts. Every person does. I think, when I look at myself and I sort of analyze my life, I think, from having quite a bit of psychology and counseling already, I've learned that I'm not very good at regulating my emotions. I'm definitely not. And And I think one of the reasons for that is growing up in a very emotionally unstable environment where you're not really taught great coping mechanisms in terms of how to deal with your emotions when you do go through a crisis. And that's why some of my siblings have they've struggled to deal with their emotions in a similar way. And I've talked about like some addiction problems, and I think so many people will relate to that, to the difficulty of regulating your emotions as an adult when you do come from a very chaotic and unstable childhood.
But I think that's the first point of recovery, though, is to be able to identify that. Because some people are out there like acting wild, and they don't even know why they're behaving like that, because they never really addressed it. They just say, "Oh, this is the way I am. This is the way I've always been." But they're not proactive in like looking at a solution of like why do I behave like this? Why, like for example, if you come from like our sort of background, then there's no real like stability. You got parents you can't really rely on, so there's no soft landing if something goes wrong. Do you know what I mean? And then that can manifest like in like your case now, when that relationship ended, like that relationship was probably welding everything together and holding everything up.
Yeah.
And as soon as that ended, then you got all these holes that were already there, but you had a secure relationship which gave you a false sense of security that everything's okay. And then it just took that to end to really uncover the true problem, which you
it's like
tackle now. Do you see what I mean? But
yeah,
you are right. If you were to look at like psychology, like if you looked at like Freud's work, you would see that a lot of it is childhood trauma. And I don't know, because we didn't really have a stable upbringing. Perhaps someone with a stable upbringing might be better equipped, I don't know, to deal with a breakup like that in your situation when you've got loads of compounding factors.
It's obviously very subjective, isn't it? But the one thing that I think is paramount, well, that definitely differentiates the two, is that when someone does go through something similar, whatever it is, we all go through breakups, we all go through chaotic periods in life, we all do. But what we don't all have is a good support network. And
that's definitely key.
That is the one of the big factors. Now, I'm extremely blessed, and I've really thought about this over the last 2 months. I'm extremely blessed in the friendships I have. Some of my family relationships are good, but for the most part, my strongest support network is my friends. And I think the reason why I say that is because the only way up is by focusing on what you do have and being grateful for those things.
Yeah.
And then you can build on that.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about, though, which was, I would say, has been transformational for me, was actually being in hospital, and not so much my own story there, but observing other people's. And truthfully, I met some incredible people. I met a guy, and I don't know why he was in hospital. He seemed to really have his shit together, really. It was, I don't know though, but that's obviously people mask everything, don't they? But yeah, he had come over to this country from Somalia, and he told me his story, and he'd actually been shot 9 times by like militia over there. And he showed me the bullet wounds. Like, I wouldn't have believed that. Shot 9 times, really? But like, he showed me the bullet wounds, and like, he was like, he thanks God every day he's still here. He thinks he's the most blessed man on the planet to still be here.
Well, you would, wouldn't you?
Of course you would, yeah. That's like insane. But the reason he stuck out to me was just, I could not believe how kind of a human being he was. He was such, obviously he's been through like trauma I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
But like, to still have within his heart just pure kindness. I think seeing things like that when you're at rock bottom gives you hope in humanity. It gives you belief, and it really sort of like you feed off that energy. So yeah, he was a blessing to have met, and you know, he actually slept in the dorm next to me. He fucking snored mine, I'll tell you that for free. But yeah, he was a lovely guy. But the one thing that really stuck out to me more than anything was how much addiction was in there. Addiction is so, it just runs parallel, I think, to ill mental health. I'm not, you know, don't have to be a genius to work that out. But when you know, prior to going there, I'd never seen someone who was addicted to crack. Now, that for me is worse than any addiction I've actually ever seen. Like, I just couldn't believe. Yeah, when you actually see face to face the effect it has on the human body and their mind and their whole aura as a person, it is a very humbling thing to see.
Yeah, I mean, with like, I think we've talked a little bit about this on podcasts before, haven't we? One of the problems with addiction is you're battling so many things, like the physiological urge of, let's just say, alcohol. Your body's craving it, and then like the psychological urge as well, because you've now got this pattern of behavior that's just rewired your brain in that way, and your brain's used to doing the same thing. And just those two things alone, man, will keep someone just hooked. And then you obviously got the withdrawal symptoms if you do try and get out of it, and you just end up going down a rabbit hole. There's so many people get swallowed up by addiction. But you were saying, like, the other day about when you were in the hospital, like, people like commenting on like your like physique.
Well, truthfully, they did. I think because, you know,
but they're probably shocked to see someone like you in there, because when you think about addiction, obviously alcohol like hammers your body, heroin would do it, you know, or any sort of drug really. Well, so I think there's like a expectation of what someone would look like. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think sometimes with ill mental health, though, it very much affects somebody's physical health. But I think for me, perhaps my addictive element has always been through the gym, and I know you're the same.
Yeah, that's what we were saying the other day, weren't we? Like, the gym really probably saved us from addiction.
Saved us from a lot of things, yeah.
Because we had, you know, childhood surrounded by alcohol. Obviously, alcohol doesn't work with the gym.
So yeah,
you can never get in shape if you're drinking every day. So really, that addiction to the gym was a shield for us to not get and follow the trajectory of our mothers, for example.
Well, yeah, and I 100%, man, because I must say one of the things I struggled the most with over those five and a half weeks was not being able to train. Like, that was one of the most difficult things for me, just because, you know, I know, you know, it's like that hour a day or 2 hours a day. It's an escape. Oh, it's just an escape from reality, man. And
so many people are anchored by the gym. That's their anchor.
Yeah, big time.
Do you know what I mean?
Man,
like,
big time.
So I was quite surprised when you told me about in that facility, they did have a gym, but it was always locked up. You said you had to have an occupational therapist to open it or something.
Yeah, it was just never used.
I find that bizarre, because like the gym is probably the best medicine to get them going again, get them into a routine. Like you said yourself, like, routine was part of the way to recover. Man. Like, eating at the same time, sleeping at the same time. I find it crazy, man, that they don't use the gym.
I think
because like you said, a lot of the people that are in there are addicts, aren't they? If you could swap the addiction for something positive, do you know what I mean? Like, they're getting a free endorphin rush versus the crack that they're doing.
It's attempting to develop new habits, and yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That was one thing that stunned me. It wasn't a big gym; it was only a little gym. You could only probably have one or two people.
No, but my point is like, because you were saying the reason they didn't want you in there is because of all this health and safety nonsense, right? And they don't want to be liable if you injure yourself. But come on, like, they have it in prisons, right?
Yeah.
Prisoners get to use it every day.
Yeah.
So, but they won't put it in a mental health facility that's meant to be rehabbing people.
Yeah, that did surprise me.
That doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, I think there's obviously room for improvement within things like that.
Yeah, but I think maybe that's not. Obviously it's a problem with the mental health providers, but I guess just medicine in general, like they're not looking for preventative measures, are they? That it's more like reactive stuff. Once you get to the point where you've had your mental breakdown, now we're trying to sort it with perhaps talk therapy, or we'll give you some antidepressants or that. But why not try and get the prevention in early? If you got them in the gym, because we got in the gym early, I think that's what saved us from addiction.
Definitely.
Right? So why not get those preventative measures in? And as I said, like if you can fund for gyms to be in prisons, why not have it in mental health facilities? I don't understand that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, man. If the one thing that shocked me more than anything in there was that, and I did keep saying that to the staff. And to be fair, a lot of the other patients, they wanted to do some form of exercise, because actually you do have a lot of kind of like downtime in there. Because obviously it's a locked facility, so you can't go outside. So, outside your meals and psychology, there's a lot of downtime. But one thing I really want to sort of hammer home, you talked about the structure, and I found that extremely beneficial. And obviously it makes sense why they do that when you go into hospital, is to try and straight away get you into a positive structure of, the same meal times, having your psychology at the same time, going to bed at the same time, taking your medication at the same time. Very helpful. But what that also did was to go to that new reality, the new stimulus. Prior to me going into hospital, I was in a place where I couldn't stop contacting the woman that I had the on-off relationship with. Okay. I was just in a bad place. I just, like I said, I had a distorted reality at that point, and I was just making very poor decisions. But being in there, obviously, like that first week was really, really tough. But slowly, like you said, if you can do that first 7 days, it starts to get easier. Like you said that, and I was like, I focused on that, especially because I went in there on the Saturday, and I was like, I just need to get to next Saturday, and I thought about that, and genuinely helped. But I think,
but it's hard, isn't it? It's almost like that thing that you said to me before about like another day mentality. So if you're an alcoholic, you go, right, I'm gonna be sober tonight.
The power of one more, yeah.
Power of one more. Okay. Yeah. And then the next day, fight the urge, we do it again. I didn't drink tonight. The next day, and then by the end of it, you've done a week, and now you've got momentum there. Now you can bring it into the next week. But obviously, it's so easy to relapse for these people that have been on it for time. But that mentality of like the power of one more, you just got to keep doing it. And then, obviously, for you, having a breakup, the stimulus is always there in it. Like if you're home alone with your phone, it's so easy to try and message that person. Anything could trigger it. You're scrolling through Instagram, you see their photo, whatever, maybe even on your phone you've got photos of each other, whatever, you've done stuff. So to be separated from that and then put in that facility, I can imagine if you just go through the pain of today I'm really feeling like I want to message that person, but I can't because they've taken my phone or whatever. And then that first week, that's like I said, that 7-day period, you do it for 7 days consecutively, and then the next week should really technically be easier.
Yeah, I think that first 7 days is like, it's like building the foundations of a house. It's like you're laying the foundation.
You are. That is what you're doing. You're making a new like neural pathway, pattern of behavior. And as I said, like that doctor said, like if nerves that fire together, they wire together. But that will take time. If you're not even firing them, how can you expect it to wire into a new positive pattern of behavior?
Yeah,
you've got to get that stimulus going first. And I think that's the struggle for most people that are probably struggling with a lot of mental health, is just forming that pathway first.
Definitely, man. Yeah, I think the first step's always the hardest step, isn't it? And I think could I have stopped in that negative pattern of behavior if I wasn't lucky enough to have been helped by my friend who contacted the police? And then, you know, I have so much admiration for the police, but also for all the people I met working in the psychiatric unit. They're just amazing human beings. And could I have done it without them? No, I don't think I don't know if I could have built that first 7 days, because I was in such a bad headspace.
Where do you think you would have been if your friend hadn't contacted the police?
That day, I as dark as it is to admit, I truthfully don't. I meant what I said, man, when I texted that morning. I meant what I said.
Well, that you didn't want to be here?
It was more than I didn't want to be here, because I'd had those thoughts for quite some time. But it was more so like at that day it took over. Right. Like it completely. It's like the conscious part of myself just wasn't there. It was almost like I said, someone else was steering the ship. That's the only way I can describe it. And you know, when we were walking through the woods together, you know, the whole time we were walking through, my head was planning what I was going to do after you had dropped me off. You know, I intended to go back to those woods, man. Do you know what I mean? And that's how you know, I know it's dark, and some people, you know, I've spoke to so many people about it, and some people just can't grasp it. They're like, you know.
I mean, like it's challenging for me because I've never thought like that. Like, I've obviously been through some stuff. Everyone has adversity and stuff, but
of course.
I've never got to that point. So, but at the same time, I can understand, like I said, about the compound effects, how things can build up, create a distorted reality, and then if you truly believe it, it's almost like you're. What do they like? I think they say like you think consciously like 10%. And the rest is like pre-programmed in your subconscious, right?
Exactly.
So you've got to think your subconscious is built on your day-to-day things compounding together. Same patterns of behavior. You do the same thing. You have like, what was it? I don't know, like 89% of the same thoughts you had yesterday. All that stuff. So if you bring that into account, and it's all negative, I could see how the subconscious could override, and that's probably why you felt like it wasn't you steering the ship.
Definitely.
It's probably your subconscious that's absorbed all that negativity. It's all compounded together, and now you're thinking about stuff that, you know, you shouldn't be.
You know, the people who sort of critique people having those emotions, or critique.
Well, the common one is they go, "Oh, it's selfish."
Yeah,
that's what they say. But when someone says that, I think you're disregarding something very complex.
It's like, for example, if I'd grown up in a world where I hadn't had that much trauma, and I'd had no significant relation to anybody who's got ill mental health or suicidal thoughts, I'd probably think in a similar way that it's actually, maybe not that it's selfish, but maybe that's just not, I wouldn't have any grasp of it or concept of it, of how and why someone could get to that point. Like, how could you not want to be alive? And I can understand how some people would have that perspective. I can see that, but ultimately, I think for me, it's about, because that's what I'm doing right now. I'm challenging my thoughts on it. Is that it can happen to anyone. Tyson Fury, you know, I'm so happy that he shared his story in the way he did, because that, you know, it's very difficult for someone to sit there and suggest that it's bullshit. Because if he's doing that, and he's a man who had everything going for him, and he still gets to that point that he talks about how he wanted to crash his Ferrari off a bridge or into a bridge. You know, it can happen to anyone, man. I think that's the point. But for me, what's important now is obviously I focus on my recovery. And I think, you know, I want to share some of that, what I've done already and what's been helpful to me, because I'm not sitting here suggesting anybody's story is similar to mine, or anybody's going to recover in the same way I do. but perhaps there'll be some aspects of what I've been through that may benefit people.
Yeah, I mean, like, how do we rehab someone like that, though? I mean, I think the common thing, isn't it, is to prescribe some kind of antidepressant, suppress the feelings, and then put them on a long ass waiting list for some kind of talk therapy if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had friends. One particular friend, like she had that problem, addicted to alcohol because of some stuff that happened to her, and weed as well. And it's not like, I just don't think the NHS were really equipped for it. I don't think there's enough funding in there, because she's been put on a waiting list for a long time. And when I say long time, we're talking like at least a year.
Yeah.
It's like your mental health could really spiral in that year.
Definitely.
You might not be there next year.
Well, yeah, the interesting thing is I'm the same. I've been on a waiting list for it for about 9 months now.
Yeah.
And I have been getting some help through having gone to hospital. The one thing I'll talk about is medication. Now, I didn't want to go on any medication. I really didn't want to, because I suppose seeing so much addiction around me, you know, I've got a member of my family who's addicted to prescription drugs. And so I'm conscious and I'm aware of that, and you know, maybe I'm more susceptible to an addiction. Maybe, I don't know. I've heard people talk about how there's some genetic elements to it. I don't know, but so anyway, I didn't want to go on. I didn't want to become reliant upon medication to keep me stable or happy. But actually, you know, at that crisis point, it was imperative that I took medication to stop me, you know, having such intense intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
And, you know, on the balance of probability, I would say that it's been helpful. It's not without challenge, though. You know, the drives.
What were they giving you? Were they antidepressants? Were they?
Yeah, an antidepressant, an antipsychotic, and a mood stabilizer. And I also had sleeping tablets for days that there were some nights I just couldn't get to sleep. So I've been on quite a lot of quite strong medication. I'm still on it now. And, you know, I'd say the difficulty with it is it creates so much brain fog. Anyone who takes medication, antidepressants,
probably relate to that.
Can probably relate to that.
But has it helped?
Definitely, it has helped. I'd be lying if I said it didn't.
So in what way did the medication help you?
So, like I said, I think it stops the intensity of the intrusive thoughts. It helped me regulate my emotions better, helped me sleep for a start, because prior to me ended up in hospital, I had an awful sleep pattern. I just wasn't sleeping at all, really. So, and that's, people often say that, don't they? That when your sleep starts becoming messed up, it affects everything. So I started finally having some good sleep. And I guess the one thing I don't like is that it like almost zombifies you. And
yeah, I mean, from the people that I know that have been on them, they've all said the same, that you kind of feel numb.
Very much so, yeah.
My friend that I mentioned, she said exactly the same. And I could see that in her as well. There wasn't much coming back when I'm interacting with her. But, I mean, is it better than wanting to potentially kill yourself? I don't know. Like,
I would definitely say so. And I think for me, the reason why I say so is because I think it's really difficult to start channeling your life in an upward trajectory when you're thinking like that. It's so hard. But whereas where I am now, I can at least stay in a stable state.
Yeah.
To which I can engage with psychology, or I can engage with support groups, or I can engage.
So it got you there.
Yeah, it's got me to the point I am now. I mean, you know, I'm going to be having some conversations with a doctor about potentially looking to lower the dosage, or some way look to transition off it eventually. But you know, I'm not going to say medication would work for everyone, because I'm not qualified to say that anyway. But for me personally, it's been challenging, but it has been a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would make sense, because if you are in a poor headspace, you can't learn anything new. You can't adopt new routines, because your head's just going to be going like 100 mile an hour, isn't it? So
For sure, man.
I guess the first thing is to stabilize the ship, and then from there we can move. Like, I that's probably the most challenging part, perhaps, of rehab, is to get people in a state where they can now take on new information and be open to new ideas.
Definitely.
And then start sort of adhering to the program rather than fighting against it. Because I would imagine a lot of addicts probably want to fight against it.
I'd say so, yeah.
Because you said to me yourself that a lot of the people that were discharged from the hospital were ending up back in there after a week, going back to the substance that got them in there in the first place. So there's
ultimately
heavy
it's
on
because you haven't, I don't mean the person, but the problem hasn't been fixed.
No. But that's, again, going back to the exercise thing, that's why it baffles me why they aren't utilising gyms and getting these people into like that sort of routine. Because for me, that's, like I said, it saved us, so it could probably help other people as well.
I'd say so. You know, for me personally, you know, from being at rock bottom, it's been a key part of me getting better. Not that I'm sitting here, I'm certainly not like back to 100%. It's still, you know, it's a daily fight really at the moment. But I reflect on you know, all the positives. And one thing that really helped me was I'd been in hospital for about 3 weeks, and I'm lying in my bed. One of the nurses comes in, and we developed quite a good bond. She's a really lovely person. She just said, "Oh, Nath, got someone new coming into your dorm. He's really nervous. Can you just try and welcome him and whatever?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And he came in, and he's a big lad. He's a boxer. And he came in and sat in the bed opposite me. And I could see this guy was like, he was really emotional. He looked petrified, to be honest with you. And considering he's such a big guy, and like, you know, finding out that he does all mixed martial arts and he's a boxer, and he's, you know, you look at him and perceive him as that's a strong guy. And I went and literally sat on the end of his bed, and I was just like, "Hey man, like, how are you?" And just started like trying to have a bit of small talk, and ended up talking for him for about 2 hours. Told me loads of things about his life. Told me that, you know, he was there for very similar reasons to me. I'm not going to share his personal story, but the one thing, you know, that was really impactful for me is he only stayed for 3 days because he was lucky enough to have a really amazing support network outside of hospital. His family were phenomenal, I think. But the day he left, he came up and gave me a hug, and he said, "Thank you so much, Nave, because that day when I came in, I was petrified, and you made what was a really difficult day for me a little bit easier," you know. And for me, that was definitely the most rewarding thing whilst I was in hospital. And people often say, don't they, that when you're in a dark space yourself, it's so very rewarding to try and help somebody else if and when you can.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of therapists were people that have been through stuff that their clients have been through. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's what put them on the pathway of becoming a therapist, because they want to help people.
That element of relatability, man, for sure. So, you know, that's been helpful. Obviously, we talked about medication. I think talking therapy is, for me, incredibly important. It's been very beneficial, and it's something I'm going to look to continue. And I think it's, you know, the one place I want to mention, not so much talking therapy, but I started a mental health support group. It's called Andy's Man Club, for anybody who hasn't heard of it. And, you know, it was started in the memory of a guy called Andy, who was 23. I think he had a wife and kids, and he ended up taking his own life, and there was no obvious explanation. And his mum and I think his brother-in-law started this group called Andy's Man Club, and it started off just like coffee mornings, ended up growing, and now it's like a group of men that meet all over the country every Monday night between 7 and 9. That's been a hugely positive part of me getting better. I think just being able to share your thoughts in a really safe space. So anyone who's like, especially any blokes that listen to this, that are, I mean, they're literally all over the country. I'm sure there's an Andy's Man Club near pretty much everybody who's listening in the UK anyway. And so, yeah, if you're someone who does struggle with your mental health, I can't sing their praises enough.
Yeah, I could imagine it's very beneficial, because one of the sort of signs of a distorted reality is that you think it's only happening to you, don't you? Like, it's very intense in that moment.
Yeah, you start to think the world, it's almost like your world is the world.
And everything's against you.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah, so I can imagine, you know, if you've got a support group like that, sharing the same stories is probably like familiar to you.
Yeah, it is, man.
Although people have different traumas, when they're explaining how they feel about it, you know, it's probably relatable to a lot of people in that room.
Definitely it is, yeah. I mean...
and then you realise, oh, actually, it's not isolated, is it? This is just a distorted reality that we're stuck in at the moment. And we're on the pathway to getting back into reality.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a journey, isn't it, man? It's like the first day I went there, I couldn't say 2 words. But now I've been there for like 5 weeks, I think. And actually I found it incredibly beneficial, and I've started sharing some of my story, and you know, got to meet a few guys, started to build some sort of like bonds with people, and yeah, so I guess it's like it's interesting to me to, you know, to reflect on the evolution of, you know, being in a place where you can't say 2 words to...
Yeah, I mean, no matter what you do, if there's more people in the same boat, you're going to get out of there quicker, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? It's just
definitely...
No one can really do it on their own, and I think that's something you've got to accept, especially as a guy. Like, many men are ruled by ego, aren't they? So it's and I guess that's why they don't communicate their feelings. That's probably why you didn't tell me about your problems. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, I think, you know, much like you said earlier, like, you find it difficult to like relate to that because you haven't been in a headspace where ultimately you've been through very, very similar things to me. We've got quite similar life stories in that degree, but you come across to me as someone who regulates their emotions a bit better than I do. I would say you don't come across as quite as emotional as I am. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. But I always think, like, I always recognize that the storm is going to subside at some point.
Yeah.
And that's
where
that's what motivates me. Like, and again, it's just like years of priming your mind and listening to different speakers, you know, athletes and stuff like that have been through stuff, and you recognize, like, because without those guys, like, then I'd probably be in a bad space, because I'm thinking, why me? Sort of like, you go back to like the why me mentality, but like when you've seen other people come from a similar background and they still managed to get out there,
it gives you hope,
a positive life, then you just go, okay, this is a storm, and emotions, just period, come in and out, don't they?
Yeah.
There's no one who stays at one happy like medium forever.
Definitely.
You've got to recognize that emotions are going to go up and they're going to go down, and you just got to be able to try and keep on a level and avoid the triggers that get you down, because that's an important thing, man. There's
a good point.
A lot of stimuluses that bring you down. Just avoid those things and do more of the things that you want. And I think you know, like you said yourself, didn't you, about one of the triggers would have been seeing that person that you were referring to, who you had the breakdown with in the relationship, seeing that person in the gym, and you changed gyms, for example, like that. That's a great thing to do, because every time if you were to come into contact with her, which I'm sure you would, I mean, we live in a small town, a small community, that could bring you back to day one again.
Yeah, for sure, man. And you know, I think you've kind of proved it just there right now in your explanation of that. I think you're more of a logical thinker than I am. I think you don't ride. Like sometimes I'm very impulsive and I ride on emotion too much.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like you are more of a logical guy. And yeah, you're right. I think you talk about being conscious of not engaging with those triggers, like being, avoid those triggers. And that is what I've tried to do. So I've deleted.
The problem is, man, you can really go down a rabbit hole, like with feelings. And that's why I said to you, you have to get out of the house as well. Like staying locked in the house, you can really go down a rabbit hole, and not a good one, of just overthinking things, and swimming in a pool of negativity, man, and letting it just swallow you. Whereas if you actually get out of the house, it's a distraction, bit of exercise, whatever, just to get you regulating those emotions. Because when you come back, it's like when you wake up in the morning, I don't know about you, but for me, I'm probably my happiest when I first wake up. And I listened to a podcast about that, and he was saying it's something to do with like brain waves that are operating on a different frequency when you first wake up. So when you first wake up, you're actually your most conscious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's before you go to bed as well. You're your most conscious. So in that moment, that's, for me personally, that's why I'm most happiest, because I'm in control.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go out through your day, then you're gonna slip into subconscious patterns of behavior. But it's about pre-plan it. Like you pre-planned, like once I get out of this mental health facility, I need to change gyms. You need to think about those things consciously.
Definitely.
And make those conscious efforts. And it's benefiting you now, isn't it? Because you seem to be in a better space now than you were.
Well, yeah.
Before you went in.
The point is, yeah, I definitely. I think changing gyms. Some people will be like, "What the fuck are you doing that for, man?" But yeah, obviously, for me, like I know prior to going into hospital, like we'd seen each other, and it had like sparked us talking again. And like I knew that that's not something that's healthy for either of us right now, and so I just didn't want to put myself in a position where I'm gonna be seeing her a lot. I also deleted social media because I know that could be a trigger, and I've made a very conscious effort to spend a lot of time with my friends and my family, because I'm conscious of the fact that I have to steer that ship. Like I have to make really calculated decisions and be, put all my energy into recovery. That's my only goal at the moment is to keep, pushing myself to a better place every day. Like you said, the power of one more. But the one thing I'd say that is different this time to when I came out of hospital in 2019 is that, I wear this band that I got from the mental health support group every day, purely to remind me that actually on those days where I'm like, I'm riding the waves and I'm feeling incredible, right? That actually this problem's still here. Like that darkness is still here. It might not be at the forefront of your mind today, but it's still here. And you don't get into a false sense of security and think I'm fixed now, because I don't believe that it works that way. I don't think it's as simple as you're broken and then 6 months later you're fixed. I think it's something, for myself and for like the millions of people that do have these issues and struggles, it's something you'll probably fight for the rest of your life.
So it's going to be a daily battle.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's just what we are as humans. We act on emotion, and emotions, they go in and out, up and down, whatever. And like I said, if you can stay away from the negative things, the stimuluses that put you back in that mindset, then you increase your chances, don't you, of being happy.
Definitely, man.
And just recognize when you're going down as well, and recognize like that might not be the true reality. Because I think a lot of people, when things are starting to build up and they start to go down, they don't reach out for help because they think the world's against them and no one cares about them, and they just.
And one thing I definitely say is that what I've seen and reflected on and journaled about is actually how much people do want to help you, how much people feel good helping someone else that's at rock bottom, or someone else that's like in a bad headspace. People want to help you, provided, I think, when it gets to the right point, that you do want to help yourself. Because I mean, when you're at that actual rock bottom, you know, by proxy of the fact that you want to end your life, you don't really want to help yourself, if you get what I mean. It's paradoxical. But actually, when you get to the point where maybe the medication's got to a good point, and you know, you can start to sort of see life a bit clearer, then, you know, people do want to help you, as long as you want to help yourself.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, it's like in uni, obviously I had a hernia operation, had some setbacks financially because of that. Missed a lot of like practical labs and stuff, and it could have been very easy for me to just go, all right, I'll leave it at that and just redo the next year. But reaching out to one of my lecturers, again, he's been so helpful, like really, really helpful. Like put me in touch with like clinics that I can go and shadow and stuff, and really like motivated me to continue with the course.
I can imagine.
But I had to send that email first.
Exactly.
And when you're in a dark place, or like things aren't going your way, or you're having some adversity, it would be so easy to just sit there and go, the fucking world hates me. The university's just a business. They just want my money.
Yeah.
They don't care about me as a student. And just self-sabotage. Do you know what I mean? But I sent that email, and actually he was more than happy to help. Like, he's gone like above and beyond. But you have to ask for it.
Definitely. Well, it comes back again to that point of when I said I helped that boxer out. Like, that made me feel good.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when that lecturer helped you, I'm sure it made him feel good, because he could see you in a difficult headspace.
Yeah.
Different, you know, some shit things had happened, and it led to you having to reset a year. But actually, like you said, it's given you, if anything,
but the thing is, I would have, if I hadn't had that conversation with him, he was the one who identified that you need to apply for extenuating circumstances, because he knew my situation. I wouldn't have done that myself, because I'm the type of person who just weathers the storm. I don't want help, but he's like, no, you've got an actual reason why you haven't passed that exam or passed that OSCE, right? There's an actual legit reason here, and you need to go back and apply for this so that you can resit it and not be capped, right? Whereas my personality is usually I'll just weather the storm, and that's probably because of our background, like we haven't had support. Yeah, so we're used to just doing stuff on our own.
Yeah, completely.
Do you see what I'm saying? But if I'd have done that, then I wouldn't have this opportunity now. This has been granted now, that I've got an opportunity to resit that exam and not be capped, because they understand why I wasn't in the labs.
Right, and rightly so. But yeah, I think that's one thing we're definitely bad at, and learning to ask for help.
You almost have to unlearn the behaviour of not asking for help.
Yeah, 100%.
That is ultimately the problem. And again, that comes back down to childhood. Like when things go wrong, like from our childhoods, it's like, you know, there's not many people to ask. So you just crack on, don't you? You just get on with it, man.
Yeah. So to sum up, I'll just kind of finish by sort of like, I want something, a positive takeaway for people who can relate to somewhat of what I've been through, is, you know, Andy's Man Club, especially if you're a guy out there, so beneficial. Obviously, like where I've stopped going to the same gym as my ex-partner, you know, be conscious of those triggers and try and avoid those triggers. What was the other one we said?
And getting into a routine.
Yeah, try and get into a positive, structured routine. That's so helpful. It's been so beneficial to me, because when I have come out of hospital, I've tried to stay in that a similar routine, you know, of eating my meals at the same time, going to bed at the same time, medication at the same time. But I think the most important one in terms of like longevity of your recovery is, don't sink into a false sense of security. Don't go and get into a relationship and then allow that person to then become your recovery, or don't, attach your mental health to something like a job, or just be conscious of the fact that you've got to steer the ship. Don't allow like your partner to steer the ship, or a parent, or like you've got to steer the ship with help.
Yeah.
With help.
You've got to take a bit of accountability as well.
Yeah.
Just make sure you're conscious of that.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you everybody for listening and watching. It's obviously been nice to get the podcast back on the road now, wouldn't it? We've got a few episodes lined up.
Yeah.
So if you could give us a like, follow, and a subscribe, if possible, that'd be hugely appreciated as we try and build the podcast and develop the journey. And we'll see you next time.
See you on the next one.